Hello everybody and welcome back to part 4 of the engine build. Beautiful sunny Saturday here in Finland. Where we left off in part 3, I explained about the drive shaft for the distributor. So we're going to put that in today. I've just given it a little clean there, and we have the clamp also that's going to go on. I have this spare distributor that we're going to use. I have the lifters here that I'm going to get those in, and hopefully by the end of today I'll get the case back together with sealant and tightened down for good. I also have the oil pressure relief valve that I'm going to put in as well. On some engines they have dual relief valves, 2 valves, just like this. I think they're on the later engines. That engine has 2. This one only has 1. So 1 oil pressure relief valve, we'll put that in. Got the spring. The one thing I'm going to actually open today is the seal kit. Like I've said in the other videos, I like to have the better quality ones. This actually came with the whole engine, but this is the same kit that I bought for that engine. So always go for this better quality ones, they just fit better. You don't want any oil leaks or anything like that for the sake of an extra 20 euros or something. So we're going to crack that open because I need the seal for the oil pressure relief valve. I've got my book, and we're going to start, I think we're going to start with this. So what I need to do is, again, take everything apart, get the crank out, and then we'll fit this. Okay, cool. Right, what we have here is a distributor, obviously, the shaft that drives the distributor, the clamp that clamps the distributor to stop your timing from moving once it's set, 2 shims. In the last video I dropped one and it took me like 20 minutes to find it, but luckily I found it. So it says in the book it's better for it to be too loose than too tight, and between 1 and 2 shims usually. So 2 shims, and this is the bolt that holds the clamp in place. In the book it says also when you're setting this to remove this spring and also remove the seal on the distributor, just to make it easy for slotting in and out, and once everything is in place then you can put the seal back on. I'm going to leave it off for now because I'm not going to use this distributor. This is just for setting this up. So let's get to it. Okay, so we get the shaft and the 2 shims, and then we put it in here. I just put my finger there to stop these shims from coming off, like that, and then it locates in there. So this is what we're setting, is this lash here, this up and down movement. So I'm now going to turn this case over, and then I'll get the distributor. Okay, so you make sure that the distributor is all the way in. You give it a wiggle, see it just snapped in there. So that's located. And then there is a notch on the case on the distributor, and when the cylinder number one cylinder is at top dead center, meaning at the top of its stroke. This rotor should line up pretty much roughly with this notch on the case of the distributor. So to set this up in the right place, it says in the book that the slot on the shaft should be perpendicular with the case half. So if I roughly get this where it's supposed to be, and that's lined up, I'm just going to remove it to see. So it's not quite, get the camera down here. I don't know if you can see down there. You can see the shaft. So if I move it, so it's like 90 degrees like that with the alignment of the case. So like 90 degrees with that. So it should be about there. Okay, and then the notch which I was saying about on the distributor is that little notch there. Okay, so that's how you set the, yeah, that's locked in there. So that's right there. So now I'm going to lock this up. I need a 10mm socket, 10mm spanner. So I'll lock this up. Before I do that, I'll make sure that this is all the way down. And that's why you take the spring off, because then you can make sure that it's housed all the way down. Okay, let's spin it over again. So what we need to do is check this movement here. And it seems a lot, you know. But in the book, it says that that gap allowance is a minimum of 0.51 millimeters up to 1.27 millimeters. Right, I just cut the camera because when I tried to measure this lash, it was actually over 2 millimeters. So when I just investigated, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but the clamp for the distributor, there's a gap there. So I'm gonna bend this angle a little bit more, so then it will fit flush with the top of the case, because it's kind of springing against it, I guess. So I think that's why, well, it is why there's too much play in here. Right, just took everything off again. Nothing technical, I just put it in the vise and straightened it out. Actually, this was a little bit bent, and this angle here was a little bit less than it should be. So I put it all back in, and you can see now the distributor is right flush against the clamp, and the clamp is flush against the block. So you can see now that the play is less than it was. And I haven't measured it yet, but I've got these 3 feeler gauges together, and this equates to, I think, what was it, 25, 1.3 millimeters. So okay, I just measured it, and those 3 feeler gauges wouldn't go in, so that's perfect. So I need to realign this because it's spinning, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to get this in the right position, and then I'm going to mark with a paint pen where it should be, just in case I move it when I'm putting the crank back in or anything like that, so I know exactly where it is. And then it's time for the lifters to go in. Okay, I just marked with the paint pen. I've locked the clamp up. One thing I will mention is that it's really important that you don't assemble the engine and put the case together, and then decide to put this shaft in afterwards, because it's possible, because this shaft obviously will slide down there. But if you drop one of those shims, you have to take the whole thing apart again. So this is the time that you should do this, because then it's easy, right? So just bear that in mind. If you put the case together and then you have forgotten, it's possible. Maybe put a bit of grease on the end of the shaft to stop the shims falling off. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. I'm also going to put these lifters in. These just basically, I'm going to put a bit of white grease on there, and they just slide in there. And you just have to make sure that they're not too tight, not too loose. Right now, people, just off camera there, I removed all of this again. I put some white grease on there. I put the spring back in the top. I aligned the paint mark that I made up. Also, the notch on the distributor with the rotor is in the right place. I put some white grease on the lifters. Now the next piece is quite important, because when I lift the crank in, I am going to hold conrod number 1 and 2 when I lower the crank into position. Because I'm lifting the number 1 in the highest position, that means that it's at top dead center, which is where we want it, because that's where we've set this shaft in. So then everything corresponds, you know. So now I'm holding in my right hand number 1 straight up there. So I'm just going to drop it in like that. And then we do the trick with the bearings. There's my mark. Bump. And then this one. And then lastly this one, I think it's this one round. Let that just go. There we go. Okay, so this is number 1. Oops. That's number 1, pointing straight up. My mark is still lined up. So that's in the right place. So next I need to put my cam back in. I took the bearings out just to stop them from falling on the floor. So I'll put the cam back, cam bearings back in. I'll put the cam back in. I'll line up the dots like I showed you in my previous video, and then we're going to check the lash on the cam against this bearing that has the shoulders. Okay, I just put the bearings back in, the cam back in. I lined up the dot with the 2 dots. I put a little bit of white grease on top of the lifters. Maybe I'll put a little bit on the cam lobes as well, just to be sure. Everything rotates really nicely. So the next thing I'm going to check, and I need to look in the book to see what the tolerance is, but you see that we have a little bit of side, not much, it's quite tight actually, but we might have to take the cam back out, sand a little bit off the side of this shoulder, because there should be a little bit of tolerance there. Okay, I'm just going to read the book. I couldn't find anything in the book about measuring this gap. I think I must have got the information online, because when I was having trouble with the other engine that I was building, it was too tight, and yeah, like I can't see anything in the book, but I can feel that there's a little bit of movement there, so I think that's okay. It does mention in the book that there's a gear lash, and it's between 0 to 0.05 millimeter, and I can't feel anything, so I think we're okay there. The other thing it mentions, if you rotate the engine, make sure that this cam doesn't try to crawl out of its place. Then the gears can be too tight, or maybe this could be too tight, probably. Okay, moving to the other side of the case. I've done the same as the other side. I put the lifters in, made sure there was no binding, not too loose, not too tight. There can be some like dried oil and stuff like that that can affect how they move. So make sure they're nice and free, and like I say, not too loose. When it comes to putting this half of the case onto the other half of the case, what happens is these lifters fall out because they're hanging down. So you can buy these clips. If I turn it around, that fit in here, but I don't have any. But I just made some from some welding wire. I just wrapped them around a piece of pole, and basically you just put this down. You basically squeeze them together, and then you put them inside the lifters, and it stops them from falling out. Right, now it's time to apply the sealant that goes between the two halves of the case. It recommends in the book, and other people have recommended to me, to use this Permatex Aviation Form a Gasket 3. I don't know what number 3 is for. Maybe it's their third attempt, and maybe they've got it just right. Yeah, so yeah, and these are the O-rings. This bag is out of the gasket kit. So these O-rings slide over the studs on the other half of the case. It's very important you don't forget to add those. So on this side half of the case, you see it'd be really hard to add the sealant when you've got all these studs in the way, and you've got the cam and the bearings and everything like that. So don't add it to this side of the case. But these O-rings basically slot on these 6 main studs. Okay, so let's start applying Aviation Former Gasket number 3. I don't like doing this bit. I always get in a bit of a mess when I'm doing this. So, like I said, you don't want to go too crazy. Take your time with this. Make sure you cover the whole surface, and be really careful not to get it where it shouldn't go. So like this, you don't need to put it in those dips where the O-rings go, but I've gone a little bit, it doesn't matter. But like that. I'm not actually sure if I like the smell of this or not. It's one of those. Try and get these to stay up, so you can slide it on easier. Double check everything. Hopefully these are not going to fall out. I always look through one of the holes and line it up with the stud, and then just drop it in place. Beautiful. Okay, so just tap it down. Okay, because you put those O-rings on, the case half won't shut together like earlier when I was testing it. So there's going to be a bit of bounce in there now. But just make sure everything moves. And like that. I think I can remove these, because they're not going to go anywhere. Now, it's time to put these 6 main washers and nuts on. They recommend in the book that you use the aviation sealer on the washers and the studs, so that is what I will do. I put the aviation sealer on the washers and the threads of the 6 main studs, and you'll notice here there's 2 smaller M8 nuts on these 2. So the sequence is that you tighten these 2 up first, which cinch the that plug that goes on the end of the cam, you know, that small plug that I put the sealant on. So these 2 first. So they go to 14 foot-pound, which is about 20 Newton meters. I've written everything down. I went through the book to double check everything, and then I wrote everything down, so then I don't have to keep referring to the book. And so 13mm torque wrench set to 20 Newton meters. So let's do these first. Make sure these are free. It's also really important that when you're doing the tightening sequences that you double check everything still moves, nothing's getting caught up. Let's do this one a little bit. Let's take this off. Yes, I always double check after you've tightened anything that everything's still moving freely. Okay, this one's tightening up. Okay, 20 Newton meters. There we go. Right, now we're going to do these main bearing nuts, so which is a 17mm. Okay, I don't know if you remember in the previous video I mentioned that there's a sequence to tighten these up, and that's another thing I've written down just so I don't have to really think about it when I'm doing it. So I've written here, this is the bottom of the engine oil sump, so you tighten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then 6 in that order, and these first go to 15 foot-pounds, which is 20.4. So I'll put it on 20.5. That's good enough. And then the last one. And then we'll give the engine a spin, make sure it's still free. Okay, so let's have a check. Yep, still running free there. Okay, so then you do these main ones again, and this time it's 27. So the reason that you don't just do them up in a random order is that if I tighten, say, these 2 up first to the required torque, it can twist the case half. It will cinch it, and then it will lift this edge up. So it won't be tightened even then when you torque them all up. So you do them in this sequence that it nice and evenly tightens down. Absolutely perfect. Okay, so now I need to do all the other bolts. The other thing to bear in mind is we don't have the oil pump in at the moment, which fits in here. So don't tighten the 2 either side of the oil pump to the torque setting yet, because then you won't be able to put the pump in. Right, I've gone round, I added all of these nuts, the smaller ones, the M8 ones, added the aviation sealant to all the washers and the threads, and I have tightened all of those up to 20.4 Newton meters. And so I went round them a couple of times, double checked them, spun the engine again, make sure everything rotated okay. And now the last torque setting is these 6 main bearings. They now have to go to 34 Newton meters, and that's it. And like I said earlier, the only 2 that I haven't tightened are the ones where the oil pump goes, so they're still loose. So I'm just going to tighten these 6 up, and I think next it's get the oil pump in. Right, next up is the oil pump. It's pretty simple. It has 2 gears in it. It's driven by the end of the crank. There's a little slot in the end of the crank, I'll show you in a minute, which then in turn drives this other gear. Oil comes in, these spin, and then it pumps it up through here. Simple as that. These pop out. So this one's the one with the shaft on, and then this is just the gear that spins like that. I've had a look and checked for wear. You can measure the lash and stuff like that, but this is no high performance engine or anything. I'm not saying that it's not important to check it, but you know, everything looks fine, so it's good. And then you have an inner and an outer gasket. This one goes onto the engine case, and then this one goes against, this is the cover that goes over the top. One thing that is quite important is that when the case gets squeezed together, the sealant comes out of here like it has around the rest of the case. So make sure you wipe that off clean before you put the pump in. Also, I need to find the 2 missing studs. You can see in the end here there's the slot that the pump actually fits into, so it's easy to figure out the orientation of the pump. Oh man, I've just realized I've made a mistake. I have used the washers that are for the heads on the case. I was just assuming that this engine was different to the other one I built, because I just assumed that these may have been like the older way, but then I've just realized that these are actually for the heads. So I'm going to have to take these off and use normal washers. No big deal. Right, we're back. I changed the washers over, snugged everything up, torqued it all up again. No big deal, you know. But I also put 2 studs in for the oil pump, but I found a problem. These look like they're for M6 bolts, and these are M8s. So the hole sizes are different, as you can see. They don't fit in there. I don't even think they actually... Yeah, they don't even line up. So we're not going to be fitting the oil pump now. So I'm going to have to get that sorted. But there is one thing that I kind of did forget a little bit, actually. If I move this engine upside down, I need to put the oil pressure relief valve in. Right, so the valve itself goes this way down with the hole at the top. I'm going to put some white grease on it, and then that slides down there, followed by the spring. And then you have a crush washer. This is the old one. I have a new one in the gasket packet, so I'll use that. And then you just have this plug. And I think last time I just used like a blunt chisel with a spanner on to tighten this up. Okay, when I said crush washer, this is what it is. It's basically hollow, and when you tighten it up, it actually crushes and forms a seal, so you can only use them once. Right, I think that's enough for today. Despite a couple of little setbacks, I think it's been a really successful day. I mean, the case is now together, it's sealed. We got the distributor in, we got the oil pressure relief valve in, and everything feels really smooth, you know, and I'm quite happy with that. I'll have to sort this out. I mean, Volkswagen made so many changes over the years, and they were manufacturing these air-cooled engines for so many years that, you know, this is only a small setback. I'll get another one. Not so fast, people. I just had a couple of texts with Yanni, my friend, the guru, and he said that you can actually drill out these holes. I didn't think you could, because when I looked at the gaskets, the holes are slightly, there was gaskets for both 6mm and 8mm studs, and the holes looked like they were in slightly different position, which they are, but he suggested drilling these out to 9mm, which I have done, and it should slip on. There's absolutely nothing different between the pumps, like the actual internals or this diameter. It's only the stud size, and so yeah, I'm gonna now go and get the gaskets again and see if we can slide this baby home. Okay, so I coated the gasket both sides with the sealant, and there's two different gaskets, the inner and outer. So if I can get this, yeah, so that's obviously the inner one, and this is the outer. It looks slightly different. So now it's ready to see if this will slide in. In the book it says don't add any sealant to the side here, only to the gasket, but also add it to the threads, the washers, the same as the case basically. Right, let's see if this goes in. I hope so. You want to hit it fairly evenly as well, like. And you should hear the note change once it seats all the way to the bottom. There we go. I don't know if you hear that on the camera. It's in! So I'll just put a little bit of white grease. So this one goes in the top, and then it should locate like that, go all the way in. I don't think there's no markings. I think on some of these there's markings, but I don't think it matters too much. So that goes in there like that. So now we put the outer gasket on. I've already drilled the cover as well. That goes on, and then, like I said earlier, we put some more of the sealant on the washers and the nuts. And then I need to tighten these three up to the torque settings, and that's the oil pump done. Right, time to torque this puppy up. I just checked in the book and it says 20 Newton meters, which was, I think it was 15 foot-pounds. So it's, there you go. Now, these torque settings are pretty low, you know, but you have to take into account that when the engine heats up and expands, it makes everything even tighter. So even though these torque settings are relatively low, you have to obviously allow for that. And finally, these last three case ones, which is the same torque setting. There we go. And where's the last one? The one at the bottom here is actually a through bolt. I might have to go and get a spanner. Or can I hold it with my superhuman thumb? Yeah, superhuman thumb will do the job. Right, now I'm definitely done for the day. A little bit of an excitement there at the end, right? Now I'm super happy now the pump is on, because now the case is completely locked down, torqued down. I just double checked again that everything runs smoothly, so I'm super happy. So next time will be flywheel, maybe the head reassembly, and then I also need to put the piston rings on, which I've never done before, so that'll be exciting. I might even clean out the cylinders before they all go together. Need to measure the deck height, but we'll get into that next time. So anyway, thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe. I have some more subscribers since the last video, so I'm super chuffed with that. Thanks ever so much. Please comment if there's anything you think I've missed, etc., or if you think it's just wicked rad. Yeah, so brilliant. Thank you. Until next time.